Welcome to the Free Birth Podcast, a supportive space for people who are learning, exploring, and celebrating their autonomous choices in childbirth. Together, we'll unpack truths, share personal stories, and claim our ability to birth freely and intuitively. Here's your host, Emily Saldea.
There are many ways to interact with Free Birth Society. These include our incredible offering, The Complete Guide to Free Birth, which is the most comprehensive online course available on how to give birth in your power. We also have a beautiful free birth meditation program called the Sovereign Birth Meditation Series, designed to help you release your fears and actualize your dream birth. Our latest course is called Through the Veil, a profoundly personal, radical pregnancy companion program by Yolande Norris-Clark that offers the opportunity to travel with Yolande as she moves through the last trimester of her most recent pregnancy and invites you into her birth room to witness the birth of her 8th child. And if you're looking for a deeper connection and the opportunity for sisterhood in community with radical, like-minded women, the Free Birth Society private membership is for you, and you can apply on our website to become a member. We also offer personalized one-on-one transformational coaching with a focus on learning the tools to move out of victim consciousness and towards self-responsibility. Skills that translate to freedom, not only in the context of birth and mothering, but in every area of life. And finally, we are offering all of you, our amazing listeners, the free gift of Yolande's 20-minute birth affirmations audio recording, a gorgeous, soothing meditation that every pregnant mother should have. So just head on over to our website at freebirthsociety.com, sign up, and Yolande's affirmations will be sent directly to your inbox.
Hello, it's Yolande here, and I'm so excited to tell you about my latest endeavor with Free Birth Society. It's called Through the Veil, and it's an invitation for you to join me on the most profoundly intimate experience of my life and yours. The journey of moving through the birth process into the underworld of birth to be reborn as a new mother into a new family once again. Through the Veil is a very raw, very real third trimester, birth, and postpartum week-by-week program that includes 17 videos in which I discuss exactly how I prepare for my free birth, including so many of the messy, emotional, logistical, and relational issues that aren't often talked about in the conventional prenatal context. Through the Veil also includes the hour-plus long documentary of my 8th baby's birth, an incredibly loving, incredibly vulnerable, gritty, agonizing, naked, and beautiful family birth that I'm so proud of. I really look forward to you journeying with me through the veil.
All right, we are back this week with our third episode of our 3-part Surrogacy series. And today I have Yolande Clark as my guest. Hey, love.
Hey, Emily.
I'm glad to have you here as the third guest on this topic because, as I've mentioned in the previous episodes, you were my catalyst to where I am today with my, now a couple-year-old perspective and being an active activist against surrogacy. And so I'm forever grateful to you for the many things that you've taught me, and surrogacy was one of the really big game changers, I think, when we first started our friendship, of you being willing to walk me through, thankfully relatively quickly, but being willing to walk me through why it was so harmful and ultimately offensive, and that I was a part of the birth worker community that didn't give it much thought and didn't really didn't really think much of it, and just kind of accepted it as to what I had been taught, which is, it's this beautiful gift and it's the most selfless, saintly thing a woman can do. And so, our intention of this episode for all of you listening, and thank you for going on this journey with us. I know it can be very confronting and it's a lot to chew on. And last week's episode was, it's a hard one to listen to, but again, we're sharing it because I believe it's just so important that we hear our fellow sisters' stories that don't really get highlighted around the major cost and pain of surrogacy. And so this week's intention is to kind of bring it all together and do a bit of a deeper dive, like building blocks on what we started with Mary Lou. So Mary Lou did a really good job of kind of laying everything out and giving us an overview of what's happening and why, and kind of like the ABCs of the agenda of commercial surrogacy. And so today with Yolanda, we're going to build on that both through her personal experiences of being asked more than once to give away her children, which we'll get to in a minute, and then we're just going to take it a little bit deeper on some of the stuff that Mary Lou got into. Anything you wanna start off saying?
Yeah, actually, right off the top, I'd like to say that, tackling the topic of surrogacy in such a public way on this very public, very popular podcast it's actually intimidating. I'm as a woman who's never really shied away from controversy. I consider myself fairly open and pretty game for, both offering cultural critique and exposing myself to criticism as well. I don't think I'm a yes woman. Um, I think the fact that this topic seems so dangerous, even to me, really says a lot. And I want to, as you just did, encourage anyone who's listening to, really try to keep your mind open to some of what we're going to discuss today. And of course, you've already talked a lot about surrogacy in the past, but, whenever a subject develops such, I don't know, rigid kind of
Mhm.
cultural padding, almost to the point where open discussion and debate are kind of socially forbidden.
For context of anyone new to this, like if Yolanda or I even breathe a hint of these opinions on social media, we spend the next 5 days being annihilated, with hate mail and
Just
threats.
outrage.
It's just absolute outrage. So yes, that's such a good point to bring up.
Hmm.
Anytime it is suggested that we should be silent around a topic, that's usually uh, something that really needs to get talked about among women and really critiqued and explored.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I'm really glad to have the opportunity to do that. And I think it's different to have a conversation about a topic like this than, the pylon that social media often is.
Hmm.
So yeah. Um, I have a somewhat personal relationship with surrogacy, actually, or rather with the idea of surrogacy. So I think I'll start there. So prior to around 7 years ago, I really wasn't very cognizant of any of the ethical or moral issues surrounding surrogacy. I was vaguely aware of surrogacy as a sort of, outlying practice. It didn't have anything to do with me, so I didn't really know anything about it. Um, but that was also at the time that I had really just begun to develop an overtly feminist consciousness and analysis at that point. But surrogacy came on my radar because I had just given birth to I think my sixth baby at the time. And I remember visiting with a really dear friend of mine who was, really tragically struggling with infertility. And she asked me, very tentatively, I should say, but in any case, she asked me whether or not I would ever consider being a surrogate. And as I said, I didn't really know much at all about it. I don't think at that point I'd even really digested kind of the basics or the facts of it. I hadn't really thought it through. But in that moment, when this friend asked me if this was something I would consider, I had to really think through what surrogacy means. And it dawned on me at that point that this friend was
actually asking me whether or not I would consider becoming pregnant, spending 9 or 10 months gestating the baby, give birth to the baby, and then to hand that baby over to someone else upon giving birth. And, at the moment, in that moment when the friend brought the subject up, I was literally sitting in a chair holding my 3 or 4-day-old infant. I was breastfeeding him, and I was really in that blissful postpartum bubble. And when I allowed myself to consider this concept of what this word surrogacy really meant and what it would mean to me if I were a surrogate, I had an immediately visceral reaction of absolute horror, to be honest. Now, I really want to emphasize that this friend of mine, she wasn't being aggressive at all about it, uh, but I was, and she didn't specifically say, would you be a surrogate for me? It was more, she was kind of exploring the issue herself as well, but um, I was really, really taken aback by the entire notion, and my own reaction made me curious about it. Why did I have such an intense feeling of revulsion at the prospect? And of course, it didn't take much reflection, sorry, to recognize that this visceral repugnance was really a primal response given by my experience of motherhood and of being so totally biologically enmeshed with my children and experiencing what I believe, honestly, is uh, or birth experiences that represent, the biological norm to a large extent. Not that that's better or worse than any other kind of birth, but I have been incredibly fortunate to have had these very spontaneous physiological birth experiences, and that involves the mother's body, the mother mammal's body, any mammal, being suffused throughout the birth process, throughout her whole pregnancy, but especially the birth process, with these incredibly powerful hormones and chemicals that dictate this immediate and overwhelming attachment and love that we're designed to experience for our babies.
And I guess what's coming up in my mind is, that cultural argument, but it's not your baby. It would, of course, be a bought or harvested egg. It would not be your husband's sperm. And so, the ask of us as women, the ask of us to disassociate, from everything you just said and disassociate from that biological reality on the notion that if it's a harvested egg from, a different woman's body, then we can be willfully reduced to incubators, and that the when she was asking you that, and of course, right, like in her mind, it's just, will you just incubate what would culturally agreed upon be not your baby? Just incubate it, just put it in the oven, let it fall out of you because you're such a breeder, and just hand it over to me, because I asked you to do it. We're friends, and I've harvested the egg, and maybe it's my husband's sperm. Like, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, on so many levels, so first of all, I don't think it's possible actually for us to turn off biology, right? I
Right.
mean, adults can make up stories, we can tell ourselves lies, we can rationalize all kinds of things, and we do, but it still doesn't negate the biological reality of what pregnancy and birth does to us, which is that it makes us mothers. Um, and so even with all of that rationalization and those concepts that we may or may not be able to apply to ourselves, that this doesn't matter, it's not our baby, it's it's fine. Uh, I actually think that biology is much stronger than culture in many ways, and that we can't turn that off. But even if we could, uh, the idea of propositioning a woman to offer herself, her body in that way, to have her body used in that way, to, you know, go through the process of pregnancy and birth, to dedicate a year of her life to growing another human being that she believes she can dissociate from. I mean, even that is, it's there's such entitlement there that it kind of boggles the mind. And for me too, my first reaction to being asked if I would consider being a surrogate was, repulsion, because I feel so connected to my babies. But then on another level, it was real kind of indignation. I how dare anyone assume that I don't have my own babies to raise, projects to fulfill, a life to live.
How dare anyone assume that they can use you?
Exactly.
And it's like what Mary Lou says in her episode. She says, it's horrific that we're grooming the next generation to believe that selling our bodies is a viable economic option. And I'm sure that you would have been well cared for. And, if you were in an agency, of course you're compensated. But, when we understand global commercial surrogacy, it can be said for sex work as well. When we understand global sex work, if you have the privilege to have the choice to opt into surrogacy or sex work, then it is your duty not to do it for your fellow sisters who don't have that choice, because it's normalizing the commodification, of our bodies in a way that is inherently, obviously harmful and completely in keeping with our own oppression.
That's right. And, the parallels between surrogacy and prostitution are very stark and poignant and present. And Swedish writer, I'm going to mispronounce her name, darn, Kajsa Ekis-Ekman has written a lot about those parallels between surrogacy and prostitution. And uh, it's interesting because one of the big arguments that so many have when we present our side of this issue, our opposition to this issue, is, how dare you trample all over women's agency? Like women have choices and they can do whatever they want with their bodies and blah blah blah. And that's true. I actually agree with that. I think women should do whatever they want with their bodies. I'm in total opposition to the purchase of people's bodies. So
Yeah.
I'm opposed to prostitution because it involves primarily men who feel they have an entitlement to pay for access to, women's vaginas and anuses and other parts of their bodies. But my issue is not with women who are, for the most part, in such terrible financial straits or you know involved with addiction and who feel that they need to sell their bodies for money. My issue is with anyone who feels that they have the right to purchase another person's body. And when it comes to surrogacy, it's a little bit different, because that whole argument of, well, women can do whatever they want with their bodies. Yes, but surrogacy is not possible without this enormous medical industrial infrastructure, right? So that whole suggestion that an opposition to surrogacy is an opposition to women owning their bodies. It's just ridiculous. You can't enact surrogacy without this, this huge apparatus.
I guess in Handmaid's Tale, where the rich, husband just rapes the handmaiden, and then she lives with them, for her to breed. I guess someone out there would probably think that, okay, yeah, you could do that, but that's not what commercial surrogacy is. That's not what's happening.
No, but I mean, there are parallels there too. And I think, that example is really interesting, because I think most people would find that atrocious, right? Most people would be appalled by that suggestion. And I know that Mary Lou has presented the example of, why would we have a problem with just literally selling babies on Kijiji if, considering that surrogacy is accepted in our culture. But, I think it's, I don't know. I mean, the fact that, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, what is Kijiji?
Oh, it's a Canadian Craigslist.
Oh, I was like, is that some weird code?
No, sorry, Craigslist. just edit that out.
No, I'm keeping it, because I guarantee people are going to wonder what that is. And that was funny. Okay,
good. Glad we clarified that. But I mean, really, for me, the fact that mammals are designed biologically to immediately adore our infants so much, to the degree that we will instinctively, and we see this all the time, we instinctively, when women give birth, untethered, unhindered, we instinctively lift our infants to our breasts, and we would literally kill anyone or anything that came between us and our child. And this gets into hospital birth and home birth, but I think the reason that so many women's instincts are, I think, diminished, has, of course, to do with industrial birth and how we tend to birth in North America and all over the world. But, from the infant's perspective, newborn babies also have a corresponding biological requirement to be on their mother's bodies, So just from that basis of understanding, um, surrogacy is anathema. It's I don't know, it's outrageous to me.
Well, that was what was profound to me, was you and Mary Lou and people who started to bring this into my brain, was when you think about surrogacy from a child's perspective, from the baby's perspective, it's very easy to quickly see how unethical it is. We're going to get to the whole entitlement of parenthood stuff later, but from a baby's perspective, from a newborn perspective, it does not know or care if the egg was harvested from another woman's body. That baby 100% understands biologically that the incubator is the mother, right? And so that really helped me, was, as a birth worker who, of course, publicly and internally prided myself on what an advocate of MotherBaby I was, and what a for women, trust women, be with women, I'm here to serve women. And yet I was unknowingly completely participating in the normalizing of one of the most disgusting industries that harms MotherBaby.
Yeah, it really, really does. And
and that literally manufactures trauma.
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so where do you want to go from here?
I don't know. I'm just feeling sad about it all. Oh, sorry. I don't know. I
Yeah.
think it's, I'm politically opposed to surrogacy on every level. I feel passionately that all forms of surrogacy should be, frankly, criminalized. And I know that sounds like a very extreme view, but I think it's kind of the only reasonable response to what is, in effect, child trafficking. Surrogacy is the buying and selling of human babies. It's dehumanizing. I think it's amoral. I think it's unethical, both for the woman whose body is being instrumentalized and commodified, for her reproductive labor, in a similar way as it is for the child who's effectively being sold as chattel. These realities are significant not only in terms of the economics of surrogacy as an arrangement, but our humanity resides in our ability to love and be loved, and to have some sense of our parentage. I mean, these are not arbitrary relationships. Motherhood is not something to be taken lightly, and surrogacy on a grand scale just dismantles everything that is sacred about motherhood. And it's especially birth workers and midwives and doulas who purport to understand the physiology of childbirth and the science of, maternal infant attachment, and really the holiness, as I see it, of pregnancy and birth, who should be standing up en masse to protest the surrogacy industry and the movement. It's totally destructive, I think, to our humanity.
Right.
Again, it
And
sounds
again,
dramatic, but
no, I mean, this is a dramatic thing, just
yeah.
because it's been integrated or sold to us as this normal thing. It brings me back to what I was just saying about the viewpoint or the experience of the newborn. Of course, I would hope that the newborn who's being bought is going to a family who very much wants this child, and you could safely assume that's probably true, since they had to go to quite financial and emotional lengths, to make this happen. And yet, there's no denying that the newborn is being taken to a stranger, right? It doesn't,
Mhm.
it's no less strange to the newborn if the egg comes from that woman, which, as Mary Lou shared, is getting less and less common. It's usually harvested eggs. The
Yeah.
whole thing is kind of curated and pieced
Yeah.
together. And so again, and that's where I guess I would love to get into a little bit more about the primal wound and about MotherBaby, and anything you want to kind of add around. We mentioned the primal wound in the first episode, and of course, adoption is where that idea came from. And there are absolutely circumstances where the birth mother is not available, right? If the mother chooses or has to give the baby up for adoption, okay,
We're not allowed to say that, though, Emily. That's what's happened here. That's what this whole kind of industry has created, is this sort of cultural sense that it's not acceptable to voice the fact, as I see it, that mothers and babies need each other, which is so bananas. Like, I'm not a fan of the adoption industry either. I think there are huge problems there. I think there are lots of, um, anyway, that's kind of a different topic. I don't want to get into that, but there are lots there are a lot of legitimate criticisms that should be made of the adoption industry. But as you said, there are some circumstances where that is inevitable, and I can understand that, sometimes that's appropriate, but adoption is very traumatic. I mean, any infant that's taken from its mother experiences, like you said, a primal wound. And, doulas and midwives, like I said, should be the first to be standing up against this. But
right,
instead, they're first in line, not
to
only to
share the
support,
photos.
to share the photos.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that too. That's something I want to bring
Well,
up too.
that
But they also are becoming surrogates themselves. There are so many doulas and midwives who are actually volunteering to become surrogates. And I don't think I've ever come across a more impressive example of cognitive dissonance, because these are women, primarily women, obviously, who see birth, who understand that when a woman has carried her child for 10 months and is desperate to give birth, that desperation isn't just because her ankles are swollen, it's because she's yearning for her baby, yearning to see her child's face, to bring her child to her breast. It's madness that somehow the surrogacy industry has been so effective in its propaganda.
mhm,
They've recruited not only women in droves, but women whose background is supposedly the
to
protection
protect. Yeah.
of the maternal infant bond, and it is propaganda. It's propaganda that plays off the fact that, girls and women are socialized to deny the importance of our biology. We're socialized to negate and, subsume ourselves and our own interests. And, we're socialized to accommodate others, to center others' feelings. And really, we're socialized to remain blinded at all costs to our own subjugation, even to the
Right.
point that we would rent out our wombs. I mean, our wombs for others to use, and give away the babies that have been nurtured inside our wombs. I
And
mean,
then have that be called empowerment.
and have that go because this is, if this isn't the example of the apex
Oh.
of women's bondage and enslavement to patriarchal priorities, I don't know what is. It is just outrageous.
In getting, and just rolling back one step there, it's one thing if a baby is born and the mother, God forbid, dies. And that trauma is unavoidable, right? It happened, and now the baby has to go to strangers to be cared for and to survive. Or the 16-year-old girl that's forced to give up her child, into
Mhm.
adoption or whatever.
Which would be completely awful as well, and I
Oh my
disagree.
God, of course. I mean, giving up your child by any force,
Yeah.
it's anyway, of course, so tragic. But there are circumstances, unfortunately, unavoidable circumstances that happen sometimes to some people, to some women who either die in childbirth or are because of their circumstances and their own
Mhm.
patriarchal society that they live in, have to give up their child or sell their child. And so okay, so let's just pause there. That is true. And then it's a whole nother thing to curate that, to
Yeah.
actually go after that outcome.
Yeah.
And that has been, so I want to move into the entitlement piece, that has been sold to us, being explained to us and accepted, by us as a noble and appropriate and worthy, that inherent trauma of a, woman, selling her baby and, receiving quite relatively small compensation for that, to which there is no, actually fair compensation to that. But the like agreement, I guess, socially is that, sure, okay, many women, can say that they support surrogacy, but that they would never do that. And so, I think it's important to kind of pause there. Why? And underneath this whole lie that people are entitled to children if you can afford it. Right. So if you can afford it, so wealthy gay men, wealthy couples, hetero couples who choose to not go through it because they don't want to put their own bodies through it, celebrities, Kim Kardashian is the famous, one right now who's been using surrogates. So yeah, this entitlement piece, I think, is one of the most fiery things that we get a lot of hate back around, having the bravery to say, hold on a minute, let's pause there. Could it actually be true that everybody who can pay for it is entitled to buy a woman and buy a baby? Could that, and if you're listening to this and have never considered this, I really encourage you to sit with that for a second. I'm going to say it again. Could it possibly be true that if you are able to purchase a woman and purchase a baby, that therefore that renders a person in our society entitled to a baby and to parenthood? Could that really be something that we're all going to just accept and swallow and just not question?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I'll answer you. I've had several people write to me in outrage when I've, posted little things here and there in opposition to surrogacy. And, they ask me, uh, are you actually suggesting that two men are not entitled, like, don't have a right to have their own biological child? And I mean, yeah, that's
100%.
exactly what I'm suggesting. Uh, and and it's really very unfortunate to be accused of being homophobic because I'm against surrogacy.
Right.
It's not the same. It's really an unfortunate. Oh, it's ridiculous. Intended parents, wealthy people who uh, feel this entitlement to a child. I think that in large part, these people have been used by the industry as well, and I'm sure that the kids that have been created through this maladjusted process within this industry are being raised in love. I don't doubt that. I think that intended parents in large part do have the best of intentions. I'm sure the vast majority of them do. It's not a personal argument against individuals who, for whatever reason, have found themselves choosing
Well,
this
they've
path,
been
but
raised to feel entitled about
they
it,
have,
and it's
yeah.
totally normalized. So, it's not like they think they're doing something evil.
Right, right. This whole philosophical argument has to be based on what the effect of this industry is on those who are the most vulnerable, right?
Mhm.
And those who have the least privilege in these very complex equations. And that's the women whose wombs are being used and the babies who are totally innocent, who have no agency at all, being manufactured. They're being created as a commodity object. Um, I don't know. It's just like this eliding of a critique of surrogacy with homophobia, especially.
Mm.
It's a tactic on the part of those who would discredit anyone who's in favor of abolishing this industry. And I'm a humanitarian. I'm a biophile, unabashedly, and I'm a womanist. Uh, and I love women and I love babies, and I understand the preciousness and necessity of maternal attachment. And I fully support my amazing lesbian friends, like I said, who've become pregnant using sperm from their friends or even sperm banks. There's no equivalency there. It's really not the same. And I get accused also of being, I don't know, what do they call it? Like a biological determinist or something like that.
Yeah, wait, essentialist? Isn't that what
Biological essentialist, yeah.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah, I've
like,
heard that.
and of
What does
course,
that even mean?
I have 8 children. How dare I
Yeah,
suggest that I have any room to speak on this topic? And that really upsets me as well, because this is a global issue that
right.
affects everybody. If we create this world, which we have, which we are, where it's actually socially acceptable to buy and sell people, it's socially acceptable to purchase access, sexual access to people, and it's considered socially acceptable to manufacture babies for buying and selling. Um, that affects my life. That affects the lives of my children. I do not
Mhm.
want my daughters growing up and
Mhm.
seeing uh, economic options that include prostitution and renting out or selling their body parts. It's just not that's not okay with me, and I have a right to speak on that. And I also fully acknowledge that I'm incredibly lucky to be a fertile woman. Very, very lucky. Um, Not privileged, though.
Right.
Privileged. The ability to bear children is a biologically endowed mm, reality
Mhm.
that most women are bestowed by virtue of our physiology.
Right.
So our reproductive capacity is also a vulnerability, and
Mhm.
it's weaponized by men, primarily men who run corporations, in a multitude of ways. And our fertility is also used as a punishment. It's used as a leash. It's used as a source of humiliation, as a way to control us. Parenthood is not a right. No one
Right.
is entitled to a child outside of their own biological capacity. And I really think suggesting so is, what has created this enormous problem. But also it's money, right? It's
Right.
money and power. And again, my primary concern is with these corporate entities that have arisen, that are profiting off of vulnerable women and vulnerable yet wealthy and entitled families who and I don't know, it's just Mary Lou has brought this up too, that we're likely looking at a real coming firestorm as more and more of these children who have been created in labs grow up. And I can't imagine it. I really, it's very dark. And I think people also don't, we're not looking into what the future of this could hold for our culture. It's really yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's
It's
scary.
very
Well, and
it's
it's really
very scary.
short-sighted, right? The same people that support surrogacy would probably, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that they're totally appalled about slavery and would say that they're objectively against slavery, which, of course, yes, everybody should be. And this is an extension of what slavery means. The buying and selling of people against their consent. That's happening in sex work and in surrogacy all over the world.
Mhm. But you mentioned consent, and that's really important. Uh, that's something that is brought forth as an argument in favor of surrogacy, that these women consent, right? Women consent to this. And an example of this is so-called altruistic surrogacy. So I
Mhm.
live in Canada, and here in this country, paid surrogacy is illegal. Um, so all surrogacy supposedly is altruistic. And isn't that nice? How
Right.
lovely. Consent, consent. But as always, if you dig into how the system actually works, it's very sinister. So first of all, a large proportion, I think almost half maybe, um, of intended parents in Canada who come to, who engage in the surrogacy industry in Canada come from other countries. So Canada has actually become this surrogacy tourism destination of sorts, because the demand for surrogates globally is massive. It's massive, terrifyingly massive. And obviously, this is the demand on the part of the wealthy, and increasingly over the years, countries where the global surrogacy trade has proliferated, thanks to horrific economic discrepancies and, out and out racism. Places like Thailand, Nepal, India, where women are, kept in these compounds where they, just live there and gestate the babies of rich people, like slaves.
Like dairy
Like dairy
cows.
cows, right.
Yeah. Oh my
And,
God.
a lot of these countries have recently imposed restrictions on surrogacy, but Canada is wide open to altruistic surrogacy. Now, that essentially means voluntary surrogacy out of the kindness of a woman's heart.
Oh my God.
But but this is the thing, right? Surrogates in Canada, and I hate saying that, I don't that just that term, calling women surrogates, like it's become a like
We're a product.
these are women, right?
Yeah.
It's become a product, but these are actually individuals, women, human beings, but they're called surrogates. So surrogates in Canada cannot be paid outright by other Canadian residents, but they can be compensated for their expenses.
Right.
And they also can be paid as long as the money comes from outside of the country. So there are lots of ways to kind of get around this, but in the altruistic rubric, that compensation is a euphemism for payment, right? And
Of course.
right. And so, you read these delightfully sunny websites of, Canadian surrogacy agencies that are cropping up like weeds in every province in this country. And, the expenses that a surrogate can earn include expenses for new clothes, special foods, transportation, anything related to her
Rent.
pregnancy, rent. And that can run into the area of, $25,000 to $30,000. Now, for working class women who might make, 20 grand flipping burgers part-time, they can get pregnant and go on maternity leave while collecting money from an intended parent family on the basis of her pregnancy expenses. Well, gosh, that sounds like a pretty good deal. So it just it's coercive no matter how you look at it. Um, and and then, we talk about this in the birth world as well, and this relates to prostitution too. I'm against prostitution, and people say, well, can't women do whatever they want with their bodies? Yes, absolutely. But s- consent cannot be purchased.
Right.
You can't buy someone's consent. So, our area of expertise is birth. We talk about consent all the time. Would it be acceptable for a doctor to, pay a woman $1,000 if she just agrees to the C-section so he can make it to his golf game? Like you can't purchase consent. That belies the very notion of what it is to consent. I mean,
It's such a crock.
ludicrous, right?
Yeah.
But you know, it, it's terrifying. So, the surrogacy brokers, who are the ones who are really making coin, they're directly profiting off this objective harm that's being done to mothers and babies, and it's
And
terrible.
I remember, I think Mary Lou said it in the first episode of just making this distinction that in surrogacy, the baby is never hers. Whereas with adoption, you have the option at any point during the pregnancy and even postpartum, before handing the baby over, it's always seen as the mother, the birth mother. That's even called that, right? Even when people who are adopted, they still say my birth mother, and then maybe they say real mother. Or my bio mom, right? So it's kind of understood in the adoption realms that, and it's legally, I guess more importantly, it's legally understood in the adoption realms that a woman has the choice to change her mind because it is understood that she is the mom. But with surrogacy, because it's, curated through agreements beforehand, and that the woman gets pregnant with intention, to be a surrogate mother, the baby is never seen as hers. And so what an epic, way to reduce a woman and a mother. I mean, just what a really like mind-blowing way to reduce a woman to nothing but the product, or like the
Absolutely.
machine, like Robbie Davis Floyd talks about,
Exactly.
in tech, in the technocratic model of birth. And we said this before we were recording, it's such an extension of industrial birth and the way that we dehumanize women, and then getting into social media, the way that the headless woman is celebrated and the hero doctor is, sexually assaulting her as the baby is born. And it's just celebrated as normal birth. And oh my God, the miracle of life. And then we go into surrogacy and seeing how willing women are to celebrate the dehumanizing, absolute rape of MotherBaby.
Exactly, and, another accusation that's often, hurled my way, our way is, you're fetishizing motherhood. You're, like, why are we idealizing motherhood? Well, yes, I'm absolutely I definitely idealize motherhood is ideal. Motherhood is everything. Like, who are we if not for our mothers? Like,
Right.
it just
For
hurts
better
my
or
heart.
worse, right?
For better or worse, exactly.
Yeah.
And, from the moment
Fetishizing.
fetish is such
What
a
does that even
ridiculous it's
mean?
so disgusting.
Well,
Like,
it's just every single way of shutting us and silencing us, every single way. And obviously we don't care and we have thick skin and we're never going to shut up about this, but every single way possible, in the horizontal violence, which is the genius of patriarchy. It's the genius of, you turn the oppressed communities on each other. It's so, it's painful. I don't want to make light of it. It's really painful to witness how quick women come to the defense of their own oppression.
definitely, and how eager we are to further this disconnection between our bodies and nature and this amazing earth. Like, this whole from the moment an embryo starts to develop inside a woman's body, whether or not the embryo or fetus are created from that woman's own genetic material, this thing that's gonna become a fetus and a baby, it's being nourished and formed by that woman's blood. Her heartbeat is regulating the baby's heartbeat. Her cells and organs are allowing that baby to grow. This child is being constituted as a human being from her body. Every single cell is being influenced by that woman's emotional state, her chemical state, the food that she eats. When she has an orgasm, that baby's being flooded with oxytocin from this woman's body. Whether or not they share a genetic imprint at the beginning, by the end of the pregnancy, that woman is the only mother this baby knows. And she's the child's entire context. She's everything to this child. So, when I read all of this pro surrogacy literature, especially the propagandist websites of these surrogacy brokers and agencies, which includes testimony from surrogates themselves who say things like, "It was such a wonderful experience." You know, at first I was worried about not bonding with the baby,
Mm.
but I quickly realized that it's just not my child, and I was able to disengage.
Oh,
Like, this is so heartbreaking. It's so heartbreaking, and it's a lie. It's not a conscious lie, perhaps, or a deliberate lie, but it's a lie that I think women who act as surrogates have to invoke in order
oh,
to
yeah.
assuage the pain of acknowledging this
It's a
connection.
biological lie.
It's a biological lie.
That was what was
Biology
so
anyway.
powerful about what we shared last week with Brianna's story is that she totally went along with that, halfway through her pregnancy until she couldn't lie to herself anymore. And then when she connected those dots, the cost of ingesting the truth, and being real with what she was doing, she has to live with that the rest of her life.
Oh, it's
And
so
yet, she chose the truth. She
yeah.
chose to not hide from the truth and to feel the pain of that. But I could totally empathize with the woman who are, what the fuck is a woman supposed to do when she's already pregnant? I mean, it's not her legal right
Right.
to retain her child. And so my God, and yeah, and that, like, going, into the just the many ways that we get silenced, like you mentioned earlier, who are we to speak because we've been blessed with the privilege of fertility? And I think there's another space there of, I don't know what it's like to navigate infertility, and I can only sympathize with what I've witnessed in the women around me who have had to contend with that. And and neither of us in any way, shape, or form would ever make light of how deeply painful that is if a baby is wanted. And yet, you and I both know women who contend with their infertility and would never purchase a baby and use
Yeah.
a woman that just
Oh,
that.
there are lots of women who are in who struggle with infertility, uh, and also gay men and lesbian women who
Well, all
are.
gay men struggle with infertility.
Yes, no, but my thank you. Yes, they do. That's true. But it shouldn't necessarily be a struggle in their case. Anyway,
Right,
that's
right, right.
the thing too, right? But no, lots of women who are infertile who also understand this and who
Right.
are in favor of abolishing the surrogacy industry as well. But I just wanted to say a quick thing about uh, just that dissociation that Brianna mentions in her interview with you, and which many brave women who have acted as surrogates and who are willing to acknowledge you know their experience really truthfully, um, and it's actually quite similar to many former prostituted women who have exited from the sex industry, who will talk about how while they were in it
Mm,
they had also convinced themselves that this was very empowering, that it
mm,
was work that they enjoyed, that they just were, highly sexual women, and so this was like a great job for them,
mm,
that it was great, that none of it bothered them. And it was only until they were able to exit the industry that they could look back on, those attitudes that they expressed and recognize them as, trauma. This is how people deal with trauma when they're in the midst of it, is really denial, I think.
mm.
And it's very, very common. And I also wanted to just speak quickly to, again, to that what we often, and this is prevalent throughout, surrogate industry kind of testimonials, positive testimonials. The sense that, like, oh well, I recognized it wasn't my baby, so no, I didn't get attached. All through the pregnancy, I just knew it wasn't my baby. I didn't feel any attachment. And I actually talk a little. I don't talk about surrogacy, but in my program Through the Veil, I talk as a pregnant woman because it's a that program uh, travels with me through my previous pregnancy. I talk a lot about, and this is important to me because I've experienced it, feeling as a pregnant mother that I don't necessarily have a connection with my baby. Almost every mother that I've ever coached or consulted with, including myself, has said at one point during their pregnancy that they don't really feel connected with their babies. They feel alienated. They feel as though even this might be like a foreign invader. And
Or
my
ambivalent.
right, or just a lot of ambivalence about the pregnancy. And my response to that is that it's completely normal. We don't have to, as pregnant mothers, feel consciously connected to our babies. There's no requirement that this be a conscious or happy or fluffy kind
Hmm.
of sense, right? We are our babies. I've felt totally disconnected from my babies during several of my pregnancies, even a lot of the time, throughout a pregnancy.
Well, and what does
Um,
that even mean,
and what
right?
does that even mean? Because,
Like that
we're
you're not
human
having
beings.
like dreams of them telling you the name,
Right.
and that they're, you're feeling, I mean, what does it even
Really.
mean to say
Like
that
that.
we're connected or disconnected when they're literally
Exactly.
inside of us? And
Exactly. That.
that if it's not your biological material and it was put in you and then you grow the baby, it does not negate this
No.
point.
It doesn't. That this encounter that we have with our children as they grow inside our bodies, the connection is already there. It's under the surface. You cannot escape it, and we can't escape it intellectually, really, even if we want to.
And what about when we flip it? And how many women I know who have done IVF or IUI or whatever, where they use someone else's egg and then the egg is put into their body. I mean, are we going to say that that's not their baby?
That exactly. Yeah, that's very true too. Really important. Yeah. And yet at the same time, I can't help but wonder what the effect might be if we're going out of our way to disassociate from the child that's kicking and moving inside our womb. I mean, like, who knows? I don't know if there is an effect or if there's an outcome, but the purpose of birth is not just to eject some random baby from a
Right.
random vagina. The purpose of birth is to actually establish that chemical and physiological condition for the most ecstatic and highest experience of bonding and connection possible for human beings ever,
Which then
right?
renders optimal survival and outcomes.
Exactly. Like, this is a chemical and physiological reaction. It's not a choice. We
Hmm.
don't, I mean, yeah, this is what happens to every single mammal on the planet. unless the birth is radically disturbed. And then, anyway, that's kind of a different thing, but I don't know. It's just it's depressing and scary, honestly.
So I guess our, ask of all of you listening is to consider this and to really do your own, insightful internal assessment of considering what we've shared on this 3-part series, and considering I'm going to assume, if you are listening, that you love women and that you love babies and that you want women and babies to be protected and honored and supported, because you understand that is the way to a better world. I'm going to just assume that if you're listening to this podcast, that you understand that the wellness and protection and love and support of mothers and their babies, is the path. And so we can't have it both ways. We can't commodify and traffic babies, and women's bodies. We cannot reduce women to incubators and call that empowerment, and also say that we want women and babies to be protected and supported and centered. We can't do it both ways, because they're opposing sides. And so, my intention with these episodes are to stir up some thought. If you haven't thought this before, like I say in the first episode, it took my older sisters walking me through this to get it in the way that I get it now. And so I'm really grateful to women like Yolande and Mary Lou, who have the just enormous courage to keep putting out what is seen as radical and dangerous and should be silenced content, which, back to Yolanda's original point, isn't that just exactly highlighting the very reason why we're here today and why we must talk about this stuff. And even if you don't agree with it, and I guess that's fine, but even if you don't agree with it, hopefully, you're willing to consider what we've discussed, and that our sole intention is to be for women. And we cannot be for women and believe this absurd misogynistic lie that selling our bodies is empowerment. This whole neoliberal reframing, never hurt anyone's feelings and always talk around anything and avoid any real standing for any platform, so that we can all kumbaya without ever actually talking about anything.
Like the birth world is so exactly, the birth world in general is complicit in this industry, because social media is riddled with photographs of these surrogate births, which on one hand, graphically and blatantly depict these terrible instances of separation that they're depicted actually quite honestly. Often you'll see these beautifully shot photographs of a brand new baby, tagged with the hospital bracelet, of course, wearing those stupid newborn caps that are so dangerous and detrimental, being handed off to be placed on a strange man's chest, the intended father, while the surrogate, the birth mother, is kind of blurry in the background of this photograph, with her arms sometimes even reaching out to the baby that she just gave birth to, because she's still a human being, right? We think.
If that doesn't make you
just
cry,
I don't know. I mean, these images are being glorified all over social media, because the birth photographer has a stake in in
going viral.
In going viral, right? And the midwife has a stake because she's been hired to be present. So I think we all need to have a little bit of courage here and stand up for what I hope we all on some level know is right. This is not right,
It's like intersectional new wave feminism has forgotten about women. It's so interesting. It's like for the gay man and for all these other people. It's like, where is women?
No, you know what it is? It's that people don't understand what feminism or intersectionality mean?
Right, of course
That
not.
is
Well, that's the point.
that's another conversation.
Yeah, we don't have the courage to go there quite yet. But
Okay.
yes, I mean the centering of women, that's a very simple, obvious thing. And does surrogacy center women? Fuck no. So, that's how we can find our way back to authentic feminism, by asking the question, does it center women? And no, and you know what? If somebody in the world listening to this wants to challenge us and show us where it does, I am super open to hearing that. But I think you'll be hard pressed to prove that.
Oh my
So is
goodness.
there anything else that we want? Oh, I guess I also wanted to say, around the social media stuff, things that we as a audience or community or participants in social media can do immediately is stop sharing, stop celebrating, stop normalizing the decentering of the birth mother and the commodification of babies, and acting as if that's some beautiful gift and this beautiful new wave act of feminism, because it's not. And it's
Yeah.
actually very old and it's a very tired example of patriarchy. And that's where I think Yolande and I are kind of navigating constantly, that what often is billed as feminism in the birth world is actually deep, 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 deep anti-woman patriarchy. And, we're hoping to continue, bringing some fucking truth to that, and not, like so many birth pages and platforms just totally capitulate to this disgusting notion that everything is birth, everything should feel good, there's no such thing as trauma, belly birth, blah, blah, blah. Everything is just, if language doesn't mean anything anymore, we've lost something, and if there's no one to give a shit about physiological undisturbed birth, we've really lost something.
Yeah. When a child is taken from their birth mother at birth, this creates a massive primal wound for the mother and the child, however they came together originally. It's massive, it's unavoidable, this trauma. And like so many issues that relate to industrial birth, to pregnancy, to everything that I've been talking about for the past 20 years, this is complicated by the fact that humans are so incredibly adaptable, and that we can and do go through our entire lives sublimating these issues, transferring these issues, wondering why we're so mysteriously depressed or dysfunctional,
Right?
wondering why we have no, social cohesion. And we're just not making these connections,
Why we bite our nails, because we have so much anxiety. I mean, come
That's
on.
right. I mean, this dynamic of trauma and loss is what industrial capitalism is built on. And we're just digging the hole deeper. And we need to start taking care of each other and ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Super appreciate your time and your courage to talk about this in an open platform like this, because I hear you. It is a little scary, and I think we're just constantly up against many people wanting us to shut up. And I think for both of us, that only inspires us more to keep talking, because
Absolutely.
yeah, like shit. All right. Well, thank you for going on this journey with us. If you made it to this episode and you've listened to all 3 surrogacy episodes, I'd love to hear your feedback. And yeah, I really hope that this provided some light bulb moments for you listening, like it did for me, and that's why I wanted to do this and have these 3 guests on for this 3-part series. And thank you, Yolande, as always, for your time and your intelligence.
Thanks, Emily. Bye.
That's it for today, everyone. Join us next week for another episode of the Free Birth Podcast. Thanks for joining us, and remember, your body, your choice. Lots of love.